Hello, good morning to those in Brazil. Good evening to those in Japan. My name is Mariana Buquerque. I'm the Deputy Director of Projects at the Brazilian Center for International Relations, CEBRI. And today it is with great honor that I welcome you all for the webinar, New Development Strategies Towards Sustainability. I would invite our guests to please turn on the cameras. Okay, thank you so much. This webinar is an initiative of CEBRI's Environment and Climate Change Program, by which Francisco Gaetani is our senior fellow, in cooperation with the Consulate General of Japan in Rio de Janeiro. And I would like to thank the consulate support in making this event possible on behalf of Consul General Ken Hashiba, who is our great friend and has been a strong supporter of initiatives between Brazil and Japan. So thank you, the consulate, for connecting us with the professor and making this initiative possible. So today, our event is New Development Strategies Towards Sustainability. And I have the honor to introduce and have here with me two distinguished guests. First, Professor Noritika Kanye, who is professor of the Graduate School of Media and Governance at KU University. He has also served on various committees and steering groups, for example, the Sdgs promotion roundtable meeting established by the Japanese government. He is a member of the expert study group for the promotion of SDGs by local governments. And he is a well-known specialist on SDGs since he has participated in the formulation of the Sustainable Development Goals from the conception stage. Together as our Brazilian counterpart, we have Professor Francisco Gaetani, who is CEBRI Senior Fellow and member of our Environment and Climate Change Program. Professor Gaetani holds a PhD in Public Administration from the London School of Economics, and he is a professor also of FGV. He was the Executive Secretary of the Ministry of the Environment and the Ministry of Planning, Budget and Management, and also the Director of the National School of Public Administration. He, alongside with CEBRI, is a member of other social civil society initiatives as the Arapiauí Institute. So I'm sure that today we're going to have a wonderful conversation about the new development strategies towards sustainability, mainly focused on the Sustainable Development Goals and how Japan and Brazil can be partners and cooperate in that endeavor. We know that development is important for both countries for different reasons, so they share a lot of commonalities. We have been talked before that Brazil and Japan share a lot of cultural and social ties, so it is very important for us to learn and from the best practices of Japan, and also to see from Francisco's comments how he sees Brazil in that new order. So without no further delay, I would invite Professor Kanye to the floor. Professor has a wonderful presentation to share with us. So please, Professor, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your kind introduction. So as introduced, my name is Norichika Kanye. I've been working on the sustainable development issues since around 2000, but more particularly focusing on the sustainable development goals when it emerged in 2011. So and now I've been really working closely on this issue of sustainable development and sustainability in Japan, which is sort of booming in business sector as well as general public. So let me share my presentation with you. But of course, first of all, I really appreciate the invitation to this important event by CEBRI, and I really appreciate this opportunity. So my presentation is the SDGs and Japan's action towards 2023. Of course, SDGs are aiming at 2030, but next year is considered to be important year for both Japan and the world for sustainability because next year SDG summit is organized in September, so in 1 year's time, in New York at the UN General Assembly. So this event, SDG Summit, is held in every 4 years, and next year is the one after 2019 summit in New York. What is also quite important for the next year is that SDG Summit will be held back-to-back with a so-called Future Summit. So future generation and future will be our focus in the next year. So in that sense, next year is going to be quite important for talking about the direction towards the future. But for Japan, it is also quite important. The next year, Japan is going to host G7 summit, and people are quite excited, and especially policy field, they are quite excited about bringing a new agenda into G7 summit. And sustainable development goals and sustainability issues are one of those important issues that we are now discussing for the next year. So that's why I put 2023 in my title. Let me start my presentation with talking about the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals. So as all of you may be aware, this SDGs was born in the Rio Plus 20 Summit, UN Conference on Sustainable Development in 2012. So the idea of agreeing on the SDG was decided in Rio, and 3 years after that, they were formulated as the post-2015 development agenda. I said at the beginning, I met SDGs in as early as 2011 when the proposal was submitted by, I think, if I recall, a Colombian and Guatemalan representative to the negotiation. And I was quite impressed by this idea of merging development agenda with sustainable development. It was quite new to me at that point, but I am glad that it was really became an important issue for the world after 2015. When it was discussed in Rio, we were not sure if and how this sustainable development agenda could be merged into the traditional development agenda. But now we can see that it is nicely integrated into development agenda. So that was one of the success. So SDGs have 17 goals, 169 targets, and we have indicators to measure the progress. Transformation is quite an important part of the SDGs. I will touch upon that later in my presentation. Another important concept is no one will be left behind. So it's a quite comprehensive agenda for the future, comprehensive in terms of the topic that we are dealing with, but also comprehensive in terms of the way we try to incorporate many actors and the stakeholders in the world. And what is quite notable here in the SDGs, and that also impacted Japan's action towards SDG, is this colorful icons representing the SDGs. This kind of some sort of appealing for the general public idea didn't emerge before the SDG was decided. UN issues and new UN agendas are written basically in a paper, and it's not so colorful and it's quite hard to understand. But SDGs changed that perspective and many appealing things has come up, and that also changes perception of the people, general public. And that is even more true for Japan. Important dimension of the SDG is that we have economic dimension as well as societal dimension as well as environment. So these three issues are equally involved and included in this 2030 agenda, which is quite important because traditionally sustainable development issues tend to be considered as one of the environmental issues, but now it is integrated into economic issues as well as societal issues, at least at the concept level. Here in Japan, many economic actors are interested in the SDGs, which is trying to bring environmental issues into the economic context. Also trying to bring societal issue into the economic or environmental context. So that also changed the picture in this country also. When we see television advertisement these days, many companies are using this SDG logo in their public relations documents, as well as a TV program commercial. That is quite different from the past experience. To me, SDGs is important because it is agreed upon by all UN member states. So this shows the shape of the future. And if we go beyond 2030, this 17 goals and 169 targets will become a common sense for the world to go even forward after 2030. So in that sense, I think it is very important that all UN member states reach the consensus on these sustainable development goals. I have pointed out 4 important dimensions here. One is its transformational characteristics. As the title suggests, it is transforming. It is SDGs are set for transforming our world. And after 4 years after setting our agenda, unfortunately, we had to face this COVID-19 pandemic. But we should perhaps see this as an opportunity to change the world, to change the institutional framework, to change their production and consumption patterns. So this may be the last opportunity and last chance for making real transformation towards sustainable world. Because in order for making transformation, you need to break one established thing. And in many cases, you have to transform things right from the scratch. So if the pandemic, of course, it is unfortunate, but if pandemic breaks some part of the society, then we may consider that is an opportunity to transform our world. So that's one important dimension of SDGs. The second thing that I want to highlight is that this is a new governance strategy. This is a new global governance strategy. It used to be that UN was good at setting rules to be implemented in different countries. But the SDGs doesn't have any rules to set at the global level, but instead it only set a set of goals and visions for the future, and it doesn't break it down into the types of rules, and that is quite important. In that way, countries has a free hand to maneuver the implementation mechanisms, or even economic actors such as the business and industry people have free hands to make implementation in order to reach goals. And this is something that we had never seen in this level of implementation, and in this level of setting wide range of goals at the global level. So governing through goals is a new dimension, and of course it is a new challenge. So we don't see if it works or it doesn't work, but this is a quite new challenge, interesting challenge for our world. The third dimension is that even though we don't set any rules, we have a system of evaluation and review, and that is the only mechanism for the SDGs. So indicators are supposed to be quite important, and the reports that we are preparing now, Global Sustainable Development Report, is a sort of evaluation report, and that is also considered to be important. This Gsdr, Global Sustainable Development Report, is prepared by 15 independent group of scientists, and I happen to be selected one of them. We now released the first draft paper of the report, and we are hoping to present the final form of report at the time of General Assembly next year. So this is also one type of making evaluation of what we have done. So evaluating what we have reached or what we have done is quite important dimension of the Sustainable Development Goals, I think. And in that sense, digital transformation is also quite important, because by digitalizing things, it becomes much easier to measure the progress. The fourth dimension, important dimension, is integrated goals. You know, throughout the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, it repeatedly mentioned that the 17 goals are an indivisible whole. So it is indivisible in its one set with 17 goals. So that means each one goal is connected to different goals, and that integration is an important dimension. So I want to highlight these 4 dimensions of SDGs to make forward. In terms of the governance, governance through goals and sub-governance through rules are quite different and somewhat comparative dimensions in their characters. I can come back here if you're interested in this, but for the interest of time, I move forward here. In order to shape the future of the world, we need goals. And I think that's one role, one important role that the Sustainable Development Goals could play. If there's no Sustainable Development Goals, or if there's no goals, we may lose the direction where we should be heading to in this time of complication. So I think SDGs guide us towards a certain direction. And in that sense, as this picture shows, I think that there could be another goals after 2030. In this picture, it shows 2045 to set the year of the next generation of Sustainable Development Goals. I'm not sure if it is going to be 2045, maybe 2050, but in any case, goals are important to show the direction of our actions. What is happening now? as I said, that the measurement is a quite important dimension of the Sustainable Development Goals. And every year around July, Secretary General of the United Nations released a Sustainable Development Goals report. This year's report highlighted three important things. When it was made, SDGs were even at that time considered to be very difficult to achieve because of the circumstances we are facing now. But the global crisis, such as COVID-19, climate crisis, and the war in Ukraine, have made it even more difficult to achieve the goals by 2030. And that, I think, was a quite important message that was sent by the Secretary General by looking at all indicators and progress made towards SDGs. In fact, many statistical information have shown that we are not making progress towards reaching the goals. For example, extreme poverty amounts to additional 75 to 95 million in the world, and the extreme poverty ratio even increased, even though it was the trend of decrease up until the COVID-19 came. So our situation is really bad. Hunger population is 720 million to 811 million in 2020, increased by 169 million from 2019. This is a huge amount. So the world is getting worse and worse, and even to make the situation even worse, we are experiencing the largest violent conflict since 1945, when the World War II was finished. So in terms of conflict, the situation is also very bad. So we are really in a bad situation, but we have to rescue the Sustainable Development Goal under these circumstances. And that was also the message that was sent by this report. And how we could rescue this situation is an important thing that we have to overcome in the next years. Looking back to Japan, the government established the SDG promotion roundtable meeting in as early as 2016. And attached to that is the SDGs promotion headquarters. So, and this headquarters are headed by the Prime Minister and including all cabinet members. So institutionally speaking, this is a great achievement. But when we look at it in detail, then we realize that the promotion headquarters only meets twice a year. So it's not really functional. It's, in terms of national institutional framework, it looks like it is a great achievement to have promotion headquarters, but in reality, it's just a place where people are reporting what is going on. So that's not enough at this moment. As one of the roundtable meeting established under this headquarter institutional framework, we also met twice a year, but we found that it was not enough for implementing things. So the roundtable meeting established subcommittees as of 2021, and we have 4 subcommittees, including information sharing, education, environment, and measurement. So in that sense, we are slowly make progress. The implementation is made under the implementation guiding principles. So this is a framework that is institutionalizing the entire structure, but the downside is that we don't have national targets yet. And this guiding principle is not legal framework. So companies or local governments are not necessarily obliged to implement SDGs. So it's more or less a voluntary system that we have now. Under that situation, the awarding is one of the tools to stimulate actions towards SDGs. So we have since 2017 Japan SDG Award awarded to different actors, including small companies. Also, every year SDG action plan was announced, but at this moment, downside is that action plan is a collection of disparate policies with no target or review mechanism. So again, it's not enough to make actual implementation here. When it comes to the situation of the country, SDSN evaluates all countries every year. We are unfortunately going downward trend in this ranking, starting in 2019 15th, 2020 17th, 2021 18th. Now we are 19th. Considering that we have quite big economy in the world, it still stays in the third in terms of the GDP. This 19th is really bad news. And as I said, SDG include economic, environment, and social dimensions. If the economy is good, that means that environmental and social dimension sustainability is really, really bad. In fact, we have this indicators such as gender gap index. Among 146 countries surveyed, we are ranked in 116. So the gender gap is really, really bad in situation in Japan. Even within this kind of circumstances, we have some good news because some serious initiatives are emerged by business sectors. Some companies focus more on mid to long-term goals, such as the SDGs or in line with the SDGs, and they implement or they try to implement their business plans according to these mid to long-term goals. Or some other countries are trying to manage their supply chain as a whole in order to make it more sustainable. Small and medium sized companies also tried to focus on social issues in order to do new steps forward. So likewise, there are several good business initiatives going towards SDGs. You may have heard science-based target. This is also one of the examples, I would say, of starting with setting ambitious target and trying to implement following setting the goals. This science-based target is a private organization, and under science-based targets, emissions reduction targets are established by companies based on climate science. So their target, if certified, is in line with what science tells us. So it's quite reliable. And the number of Japanese companies participating in the science-based target framework is increasing. So more and more companies are interested in setting long-term targets. Here's another example. Toyota has set environmental challenges as early as 2015. Sorry, this is written in Japanese, but it says that they include the challenge of making new car CO2 zero emissions or zero life cycle CO2 challenge in not by their products as a car, but also from industry as a whole. So this is a big challenge. And, for a few years since they set this 2050 challenge, it's just there. And no concrete action has been made. But a couple of years ago, the CEO announced that he's quite serious to reach this target. And companies working for Toyota was so confused because it was not really possible under the current circumstances to reach this target. What they did after that was to combine car industry sector with city building. So traditionally, they are not necessarily combined with each other, but now they made a new city. It's an experimental city called Woven City. And the city is going to be built towards sustainability, and the city planning is also based on sustainability. So they are not only dealing with car or car manufacturing, but also dealing with the city as a whole. And in that combination, they're trying to make progress towards the SDGs. So like this example, showing rather ambitious goals has quite impact on the business actions. It bringing in resources, be it capital, people, or ideas, and also bringing in partners sharing the same vision. And it also send a message that present legitimacy of doing good things, because SDGs are a list of good things, I would say. And also, as those goals are quite ambitious, it stimulates innovation to reach targets. So these are some of the good impact that I can see by showing ambitious goals and targets. Nowadays, municipalities, local governments are also supporting setting SDG target. It's called Regional Revitalization SDGs Financial Framework, where local business, if they set target in line with Sustainable Development Goals, local financial institutions are expected to support it, and local governments support that process by helping them to set targets or helping them for providing financial resources to local businesses. So one of the programs in Japan is shrinking local population, and the country as a whole is shrinking population too. So revitalizing local population as well as local economy is a national agenda, and SDGs are considered to be used as a good tool for revitalization of local activities. And we have established future cities called SDGs Future Cities. Local government develop their plans towards the SDGs, and when they're admitted, then they're awarded as SDG Future Cities. Now, in 2021, it amounts to 124 local governments to be counted as SDG Future Cities. Every year, we select about 30 cities, 30 new cities as future cities, which try to promote SDGs. And among those 10 cities provided subsidies to reach their action, to facilitate their actions. This year, another 30 cities are added, and now it's 154 cities we have in the SDG Future Cities. So we are running out of time, so I skip here. I think DX, digital transformation, is important, as I mentioned earlier, for the SDGs, because it can, digital transformation can make it possible to measure the progress, but also measure everything, which means that they can show that there are things that are more than necessary or less than necessary amount and trade against each other. So digitalization is supposed to be quite important. In the final part of my presentation, I also want to focus on the Gsdr Global Sustainable Development Report that we are working now. This is a framework that we came up in 2019 report. We have levers for transformation on the left-hand side, and we have entry points for transformation, including human well-being, sustainable and just economies, energy, or food system, and so on. So conceptually, these levers could work in different entry points. Now our job is to show and bring in the examples how the transformation became possible. And we have produced this, what we call S-curve. At the emergence phase, there are several exemplary actions taken, but that not necessarily be accelerated towards more transformative change. But at some point, when policy support can be made, or when social networking functions well, then that action could be accelerated towards more transformative path. And once it's spread out towards the society, then it could be stabilized. So we have several examples for this, and that is included in the report. For example, LED lighting is one example, or solar panel is going towards this path in the current situation. So making it work is important, but also learning lessons from here is important, and that's what we are doing now. Finally, towards 2023, as I said, next year is quite important for Japan, but also quite important for the world. Back in Japan, we started what we call partnership conference to propose a new SDG implementation guideline next year. And here we are aiming at setting the targets that are in line with SDGs for Japan. We are not sure if that is established, but we are in the process doing things. Next year, G7 summit, we expect leadership in the SDGs from Japan, especially showing implementation, transformation process, and exemplify some of the actions. And what Japanese government, Japanese diplomacy is focusing on now is human security and SDGs, as well as universal health coverage and the SDGs. So those are two important things, I think, for especially focusing on the SDGs. Global environment is also one of the important issues. And here, interlinkage or co-benefit between different actions is a key for Japan's leadership. I put some examples: climate change and disaster risk prevention, that could be co-benefit with each other, or biodiversity and global health, biodiversity and human rights, that also has co-benefit with each other. Also, another example is due diligence and supply chain management. So I'm hoping that some concrete actions could be emerged out of these 7 initiatives that could lead to leadership in the next year's SDG Summit. So I stop here. I'm sorry I passed a little more time, but yeah, I hope my presentation could provide some inspiration to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. Your presentation was very thought-provoking. I have made some notes here, and before passing the floor to Professor Gaetani, I'll just highlight some of them. I was very impressed by the way you mentioned that SDGs is based on 3 pillars, right? We have to look at it as not only an environment aspect, but also economy and society, and how the 17 goals, they are an indivisible whole. And I think it's very important that you mentioned that this perception is sometimes a weakness in Japan, but I will not give a spoiler, but it is also a weakness in Brazil. There is still some circles here where the narrative is that environment and economy are on opposite sides and they should be aligned. And I think your presentation was very important to highlight that. Also, you mentioned some international events that happened after the SDG was planned and how it is important to look at the SDGs in these new lenses. So you mentioned the impact of the pandemics, but is very much aligned with SDG 3, right? The war in Ukraine, we also relates to SDG 16 about peace and institutions, the gender gap aligned with SDG 5, and also the digital transformation that is pretty much aligned with the SDG about innovation, SDG 9. And also another point that I think was very important of your presentation is that you mentioned that SDGs has to be a multi-stakeholder task to be effective. So the private sector has its role, civil society has its role, but also governmental planning is also very important. So some topics that I noted that I think are very important for us for the debate part, because some of the questions from the audience align with that perspective. So thank you, Professor. And I will now pass the floor to Professor Francisco Gaetani for his comments. Please, Chico, welcome.
Thank you very much, Mariana and CEBRI, for the invitation. It's an honor to participate in this debate. It talked to my heart because in my previous life, I worked as a general coordinator for UNDP program in Brazil. And I was also Vice Minister of Environment during Rio +20, when the SDGs were born. And Brazilian environmental diplomacy played a huge role in pushing the proposal through Colombia and Guatemala. And we were very happy when at the end of the conference it was approved, and when it was transformed in a concrete platform for the world in 2015. And it's an honor to know Professor Gaetani because he's a protagonist of this process, and we feel very happy that we see things moving on despite of our confusions in Brazil. First, I'd like to mention something that maybe few people know, but Japan is one of the most important donors of the United Nations. Japan is a strong supporter of multilateralism. And in areas such as health and environment, Japan has done a lot for the community of nations in a moment that multilateralism is going for a very hard moment in the world. We in Brazil, we got trapped in this negative spiral involving, since 2015, we had an impeachment process, then we had the multilateral crisis with Brexit, the Trump's election in the United States, COVID, Ukraine war, financial crisis, supply chain, global supply chains, disruptions. And in the moment that the world is so affected by so many hot topics that are congesting the global agenda, it's really a pleasure resuming what's really important, which is the debate about what matters. And I strongly believe that SDGs platform, it's really a gift to the world, and it enables us to talk, to interact, to compare, to cooperate in a very constructive and positive way. I was very impressed by Professor Gaetani's presentation because it provides a kind of sense making in a difficult issue, because it's so it includes so many topics, and we discuss all them together. It's very hard to keep the debate focused on what matters. I like to provoke Professor Kani to elaborate a little bit more in 3 specific topics. The first one that he mentioned, and I think it's really key for the next years, is the SDGs role in a global governance debate. Why? Well, multilateralism is still in a very delicate moment. We are going through a war, a regional war that we hope that will not spill over, but who knows? We are in a moment that the trade, the OMC, the Trade World Organization, it's also it's going for a very delicate situation. We don't know how we will relate in this deglobalization moment. And finally, we're still recovering from COVID. So Japan is a leading country in terms of health systems. I don't know if people are aware about that, but Japan is traditionally one of the examples for how to handle health problems in the world. And in this moment that I think that we are now having to discuss global governance, while we are all hurt by this crisis, multiple crises. Look to Europe, look to Germany, if you look to Latin America, the West is returning slowly to the global scene after the years of madness that we had in the past. But we still have our ordinary agenda. Africa, Latin America, Asia, the tackling poverty is still a huge challenge. So the first topic, I'd like if Professor Kani could later talk a little bit more about the global governance challenge. The second topic, and I was very glad that he mentioned them, it's about digital transformation, the role of digital transformation in pushing the pursuit of the SDGs. Because at the end of the day, digital transformation is pervasive. Its potential is enormous. But we are facing in many countries, and Brazil is one of them, the risk of the digital apartheid. Because people don't understand the potential of digital transformation, because we are moving very slowly in terms of our policies pursuing this how can I say, these daily life reforms, because we are talking about a combo that includes artificial intelligence, facial recognition, machine learning, Internet of Things, virtual reality, metaverse. So there are so many intertwined technologies, and we are somehow looking to this thing as if they were coming, which is not true. They're already there. And we are now coexisting with so many different worlds, and some they're functioning in a very extraordinary speed. In terms of productivity and competitiveness, Brazil is still lagging behind in many aspects. Despite some how can I say, some more conscious sectors of the private sector, the digital gaps in our industries, in our economic structure are huge, and we are not paying attention on the need to try to close these gaps as soon as possible. Otherwise, we will have serious economic problems. And the third topic connected with the second one, it's about the future and the youth. We are now, in our case, we are losing our, it's closing the demographic window of Brazil. We are now facing, we will have more people retiring than young people coming to the labor market soon. So we have to face the challenge of facing our developing tasks with the workforce we have. In this workforce, we suffer from digital illiteracy, not only the traditional gaps in education that we have historically dealt with. We have to accelerate our learning path, otherwise we have a paradox of having a huge part of the population unable to access the digital world. And in order to pursue the SDGs properly, in order to make progress in all these fronts, we need desperately to move faster. And I'd like to hear from Professor Kani, looking from a Japanese perspective, when you look to Brazil, what you see and what would be your considerations, suggestions for a such big country, which has been a little lost in its own problems, in its own contradictions. I usually say, using a soccer analogy, that Brazil depends on its own efforts to move. We don't have a big neighborhood as Japan that has China crossing the sea. We don't have a war like the East Europe, which have Russia. We don't have natural disasters. We don't have huge, and we don't have enemies. We are traditionally a very peaceful country. Our frontiers are established for more than 100 years. So we depend only on ourselves, but we are not doing our homework properly. So if you can explore a little bit from your perspective, from your experience in Japan and international community debate the SDGs, what sort of thoughts come to your mind when you look to Brazil? Well, these are my initial contributions. Thank you.
Thank you, Chico. Good contributions, I should say, because most of them is not only about the Brazilian reality, but also a very good interpretation of what Professor Kani told about the Japan perspective. So I think it was very important to see your comments. Professor Kani, would like to react to Francisco's questions, and then I go to the questions from the audience.
Yes, thank you so much. Thank you so much for your excellent comments. I really appreciate that, and it was really provoking my thought. So the first part, global governance challenge. Well, I agree with you in that multilateralism is facing really very big challenge now. And many global issues are on the table, and we have to deal with them. But at the same time, we have conflict in Russia, and we have many problems locally. I was living in the US for 1 year, and I just came back from the US in August. But what I saw in the US was that it was really divided. The country is divided in many dimensions. It's not just about Trump against Biden, not just that thing. I think it's more deeply embedded in the country. So, while multilateralism is important, and also while global issues are facing really in dangerous stage, the situation in the world is very bad and challenging. When I look at Japan facing the COVID, it's really peculiar situation in this country, partly because this country is island state. Japan has closed the border for quite a long period of time. And I think that also impacted our economy. Now, Japanese yen is getting weaker and weaker against US dollars or against euro. That is not just because of the how they manage the financial sector, but also it was impacted by the reaction to COVID, because COVID-19 came, to the world in the same way, but reaction are different. Currently, the number of patients are the largest in Japan throughout the world, and this trend has been there for, I think, the last 4 or 5 weeks. So the situation was really changing, and the situation in Japan, it's quite typical in COVID, is that Japan is sort of isolated from other parts of the world. So that's what we have to think about, and we have to concern about. But at the same time, as you mentioned, the transformation is one sort of hope that we can look at, and digital technology is quite hopeful to make a leapfrog from what it is now to the transformed world. I also agree with you in that digital gap is quite important and serious problem. Also here in Japan, Japan is, I'm not sure, I don't know if you know well, but Japan has, I think, has faced a quite serious poverty issue domestically. It's not less than $1 or less than $2 level of poverty, but our poverty is what they call it's how do you call it? It's comparative poverty. So when you try to live in this country, it's quite difficult to live, and that sort of poverty is quite widespread, and 1/7 of population are now in the poverty level. So digital gaps are also a serious problem in this country. We are also facing aging population that is also probably the same as Brazilian situation, as you mentioned. I mean, you are going towards aging maybe, but at the same time, youth are getting more voice now, and people are trying to listen to young people's voice, which is a good tendency. And that was inspired by the Sustainable Development Goals as well. So that is some positive trend here. And finally, you talked about, you asked me about my thought about Brazil. And of course, to me, Brazil is a nature-rich country, and Amazonia's forest is quite important to the world. But at the same time, I also sometimes see that a forest decreased in terms of its volume, and also that is related to poverty or economic situation in the local people. So while it is important for the global level, locally, some people are suffered by, their economic situation or struggling with their daily life. And that sort of situation is the same here too. As I said, many people are under poverty level here in this country, while they're also, living in this rather rich country as a whole. So that gap is also quite serious problem. And when I look at Brazil, the first thing that came to my mind is the gap between the global importance and local struggle, and how you can deal with that gap towards more sustainable future.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Kanye.
Thank you, Professor Kanye. And we have a lot of questions from the audience. We have more than 100 people watching us, combining Zoom and YouTube, so a remarkable audience. And we have some questions about the role of technology that you mentioned, Professor. Some of them I'm combining some questions for the sake of time, but some of them asks how, for example, 5G, artificial intelligence and international of things, big data can help to achieve the SDGs goals. If you could elaborate a little bit about the role of technology, it'd be great. And also the other questions that I want to direct to both of you, because I think the countries have different realities, is about the connection between the national level and the subnational level. The question mentioned the future city programs that you brought to our attention, Professor. So if you could elaborate a little bit more about the relationship between the national and subnational governments in Japan, if this relationship is cooperative or not, where are they achieving that? And I would pose the same questions to Chico, because in Brazil we have a federative model. So we have the national government, but also the state level and the city level. If he could also give us a hint of how he sees the connection between these three levels. So first question about the role of technology, and second question about this connection between national and subnational levels. Do you want to start, Professor Kanye?
Yes, thank you. So, I think the importance of technology is to leapfrog from what we have now to what SDGs are envisaging. So one example is a smart city, energy management. By using digital technology, we are able to know where more energy is produced in a renewable manner. Solar panel can produce energy in the daytime, but in the nighttime, that is in demand. So you have to store it in a battery. But if you make it more efficiently, then it is possible to manage when it is necessary. You take out of the battery the energy and you use it, and when it is surplus, then you store it. So digital technology can be used for this kind of stuff. The same thing could be applied to the food waste. We can identify where the food waste takes place, or where the food waste is produced, and where the demand is existing, and we can measure those and trying to bring them together in a different place. For example, NTT, that's one of the largest cell phone company in Japan. They started a new service to have a city cycle. So in a city, mobility is important, and sometimes people use car. But if they use bicycle, it's more environmentally efficient and friendly. So what they did is that when the demand is more, then they bring more bicycle to that station so that more people can use bicycle. This is, I think, one way of using technology, but I think one of the advantage of using technology is that they can measure what is there and who is in demand, and how to trade those between those two situations. So that's my answer to the first question. Shall I move on to the second one, or should I wait for
Yes, please go ahead, Professor.
Okay. About the national and subnational level, in terms of the Sustainable Development Goals, national level action is lagged behind subnational level actions. So as I showed you earlier, there are many schemes focusing on the SDGs at local level, including Future City scheme. Some financial schemes also existing. This is not just because of the sustainable development goals, but the motivation came from this aging population. Because population is aging, and also we are losing population, the labor population, local governments are facing problems of getting more income in order to support traditional medical system, for example. So they have to deal with that. Then the sustainable development goals or sustainability issue came in, and they thought it is possible to make use of this sustainability issue in order to make the local government more sustainable, local economy more sustainable. And that's why people at local government are catching up with the sustainable development goals. And that is good also for sustainability more in general. As I mentioned, it's not just about economic sustainability, but environmental sustainability as well as social sustainabilities are included. So in some local government, they take actions to increase the voice of young people, and they established in the local government the young student section, especially focusing on young women section, and trying to hearing the voices from high school girls. That functions well. That attracts also high school girls' attention, and they send messages through SMS or Facebook and those technologies that are familiar to them, and that became the city sort of famous and attractive city. So this is one example, but sub-national level action is more active here. And I think that's partly because it is easier to move forward in local governments rather than the national big body. I mean, when your body is smaller, it's easier, and decision making is much easier. And once decision is made, it's easier to take actions, move the decision into actions is more easier. Whereas, if your body is big, it takes more time to make decision, and from decision to action, it takes more distance to reach decision to get to the action. So this kind of situation also exists in Japan, and subnational level is more active in terms of sustainability.
Thank you, Professor. That's the point. You have the national level who has the budget and the long-term view, but also the subnational level is more close to the local community. So you have to coordinate between them to make SDGs and other public policies effective, right? So Professor Gaetani, please.
Brazil has a very specific sort of federalism, because on the contrary of other federalist countries, our model is a model of shared competencies. So in many sectorial areas, the three instances of government are responsible for the problems, and they should negotiate the distribution of responsibilities. The premise for adopting this model is the heterogeneity and complexity of the country. So you would have a kind of different configuration of the relationships between the three powers in Amazon than in the South, for instance. You expect that in the South, local governments would play a more protagonist role, while in Amazon, the federal government should be more active. So this model, which we call it variable geometry, it's somehow designed to enable a cooperative federalism. Unfortunately, we haven't observed this sort of practice in the country. At the end of the day, we are formally a federation, but we behave as a huge Napoleonic centralized country. We have a kind of centralizing bias. But we have to discuss this in more detail. Let's take, for instance, 5 intergovernmental policies: health, education, social development, security, and environment. Each one of them has a different sort of arrangement. So these are intergovernmental policies that you depend on the cooperation of the 3 instances of government. But that's not how it happens. And instead of evolving towards a cooperative federalism, we evolve towards a predatory federalism. So today, take the SDGs combo, the SDGs platforms. Some states and some municipalities, they did nice work. They are doing nice reports, they're tracking the evolution of the indicators, but they are doing it by themselves because the federal level, the federal government, abandoned these debates after 2016. So it's as if we didn't have anything to do with this story, which is it's sad and it's a paradox, for Brazil was a founding member of this debate. Since 2018, we have had a government that it's a sort of, it denies the hostile to the UN and denies the importance of this platform. So it's sad because we're wasting a huge opportunity of encouraging intergovernmental dialogue, building synergies, developing complementary approach towards our problems. So I think that the new government will have a huge task ahead in terms of not only rebuilding a previous situation, but also building it differently, and in some areas building for the first time. We have a huge agenda, and you have to pursue this agenda with the support of the SDGs framework in a very balanced and careful way. This is not a 100 meters race. This is a marathon, but we need a national effort towards its achievement. And I think that the next government will bring this agenda at the center of its national planning process. Otherwise, we will again wasting a huge opportunity of joining the community of nations in a global effort towards a better world.
Thank you, Chico. I totally agree with your remarks. And we are unfortunately moving to the last 5 minutes of our debate today. So I have a last set of questions that I would like to extend to both of you also, and please use this time as your final remarks as well. I will combine 2 questions, one from George Yasui, who is a PhD at Hokkaido University in Japan, and the other one from Suishiro Mazukata. The first question is, if you think it is possible to reach most of the sustainable development goals by the established in the 2030 agenda, And the other question is, in promoting the SDGs, how do you think Japan and Brazil can work together in bilateral cooperation? So the first question, if you think we are in the path to reach the SDGs, and the second, how Brazil and Japan can work together. Chico would like to start this time, so we'll leave Professor Kani to close our debate.
Okay, well, I went to Japan once, and I was completely impressed and fascinated by the country, the culture. And I think that Japan has something that we underestimate, which is a very unique set of values that we should learn a lot with them. First, I think they are simple. They have a concern to keep things simple. And simplicity and frugality, it's key for development. In Brazil, we are a little bit confusing. We try to achieve many things at the same time. We waste a lot of time pursuing multiple priorities at the same time. The Japanese, they're focused, which is a first thing that I think it's something that we should keep in mind. So I think that we should learn with Japanese values. The second point, I think Japan has been a pioneer in areas such as recycling, circular economy. It's an island state. They have managed, they are used to scarcity. Brazil, it's a country that it reasons in terms of abundance. Abundance is a horrible teacher, and scarcity is a very good teacher. So we should learn with this mindset, because at the core of this concept, you have a concern with efficiency. Efficiency is something embedded in Japanese culture, but not in a stupid way. It's embedded in the sense of you are dealing with scarce resources and you have to use them to the best of the population. The third, Japan is a country used to tackle collective action problems. And in Brazil, we're still a very fragmented society, very individualist society. This sense of nation, this sense of united country, this I would say benign nationalism, it's something also that we think we have to learn, because it helps in the relationships with other countries, and also it supports the national understanding about many issues. Finally, I think Japan has a commitment with the future. Their leadership in technology is very impressive, and they're always trying to improve what they're doing in order to ensure a better future for the young people, but also for the old people. The way they try to keep the old people active, innovation technology oriented towards old people needs, this is something that we have, I think that could be a very important area for future cooperation. Finally, at international debates, I think that Japan and Brazil, they can together help a lot in the debates about global development and global governance. I think in the 90s, or Brazil, Japan, Germany, and India, they were the G4, and they tried to convince the UN to support they get a permanent seat in the Security Council. Unfortunately, the initiative was not successful, but the G4 mindset, I think it's very important for the world. So I think that Brazil and Japan, they have a lot of common work to do. And I'm very happy that we could discuss these issues here, because it highlights a potential area of cooperation and working together in the near future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chico. Professor Kanye, please.
Yeah, well, on the first question, I don't think we are on the path towards achieving the SDGs, unfortunately, at this moment. We have so many backlash to reach a target. But I think it is important to set the target at national level or at local level, and to realize that this is the way we should reach in 2030 or 2040 or 2050, whatever it is in the future. That is, I think, the first step to take steps towards reaching the goals. That hasn't even been done, at least in this country, in Japan. So setting targets seriously at national level is quite important. And if it happens to reach a target, I think the first step to reach it is to set the target. Another important dimension is also, as mentioned earlier, technology dimension. Technology could be used in different directions. You know, AI, IoT, virtual reality, those things could be used that way, but it could also be used for a sustainable way. And SDGs could be a guiding principle for how to use those technologies. So if those technologies and sustainability concept, especially the SDGs concept, match up with each other, and the SDGs could guide on the way where the technology should be heading to, I think the chances to reach the target is not so small. So that's my answer to the first question. The second one, I think we could do more in the context of multilateralism. Perhaps it could start with the G20 context, but also more widely in the UN context. I remember that we have United Nations University headquarters in Tokyo. And for some period of time, Brazilian person was leading that institution. also, we have an institute in Japan under United Nations University, and that institute was at some point led by Brazilian person. I know him quite well. Tarcísio de la Senta, Professor de la Senta was his name. So at that time, I also saw quite many UN institutions led by Brazilian leaders, and then also thought that we could do something together more in the UN context. Japan is, losing its economic power, shrinking population, and Japan is becoming a kind of middle power in the world politics. But middle power countries such as Canada, the Netherlands, or Nordic countries, those countries are quite strong in multilateralism. And I think my view is that Japan should find a way to live like that, those countries, living in the United Nations context or living in multilateralism is the way forward, I think. And that's where we have more opportunity to work together with Brazil in that context. Also, my personal opinion also goes to sustainability and the sports. When I think about Brazil, Brazil has a very big country in sport. Japan is also in favor of many sports activities, and sport matters in education, especially, when you are young, experience of sports influence you a lot. And that's also where, the partnership like Japan, Brazil could do more for using sports for educational purposes, be it in football, be it in baseball, or whatever it is. It provides many good cooperative way for children to work together. So I think that's one field that I personally like to proceed with.
Thank you, Professor Kani. Sports is Brazil's love language. So I think we are closing this debate with a word of optimism for the future. So thank you, Professor Kani, and thank you, Professor Gaetani, for being here with us today. I would like to thank our faithful audience who kept with us to the end. And also, again, the Consulate General of Japan in Rio de Janeiro and Consul Ken Hashiba for building bridges between Brazil and Japan. I'm sure this is going to be one of many conversations ahead. So thank you so much to everyone. Looking forward to see you again in the next CEBRI events. Thank you.
Thank you.